I'll see you in the land of Moria. Death awaits you at the border. Pass on through the gates of fun, destroy the ring of power and wonder.
Hey, Middle-earth role-playing fans, Roman here. Today we're going to be doing a countdown of the modules from the 80s and early 90s, starting with my least favorite and working our way down to number 1. Which one will it be? And we'll ask later which one is your favorite. First up, Ends of Fangorn Forest. That's my least favorite campaign book. Not that I don't like it, because it does flesh out the area, and I think Treebeard and the Ents are really cool, and Fangorn Forest is a cool place to go. But it is a backwater. It's pretty damn boring. There's not a lot of good adventures. The Ents don't really do anything to the War of the Ring, so the Third Age timeline that they have of 1640 doesn't really work. Maps were good. Can't go wrong with that. And they do touch on the Gondorian period in that region. Next up, we got Far Harad, the Scorched Land. This is probably the weakest of the southern books. I was expecting so much more when they did this one, and was kind of disappointed. It's more of a city book with Boji's Dar. The map doesn't connect with anything. I thought they could have at least connected to the Umbar map or to the Greater Harad map. Adventures were kind of weak. It just could have been a better... I just expected so much more from this book than what it was, especially with the military tables. I was hoping to see more of the Sunlord, the cruel Sunlord dynasty of the late Third Age. Next up, we get Dunland and the Southern Misty Mountains. I liked how they fleshed out the Dunish clans. It looks more like Ireland. But as far as the Elves of Amon Lind, the Lair of Turakulan, and the Giants of that region, this one could have been combined with the Isengard, I think. Dunland and Isengard could have been interlinked. Map was pretty cool. Like how... And a lot of good descriptions. Adventures were kind of boring. And I wish they could have given more military stats for other eras. Havens of Gondor, Land of Belfast. Interesting area. Loved how they filled the backstory. But really, it is a backwater region in terms of Gondor. Not much really happens there. There are issues with the Corsairs of Umbar, but Umbar never actually attacks Dol Amroth. They raid the coast of Belfalis on the eastern side, but never really go western side. They could have did more with Dol Amroth itself, the city, the port city. Would have been cool to find out what the garrison's like and all that stuff. At Helland, yeah, that's okay. Linher, and they could have incorporated Infalis with this. Map was kind of cool. Didn't really connect very well with the Sea Lords of Gondor map. But again, it was a good module, just not one of my... It's in the middle. Next up, we get Southern Mirkwood, Haunt of the Necromancer. I never actually played this one on its own. Everything's in the second edition Mirkwood book. Southern Mirkwood, I like how they did the Gondorian period. The Necromancer, doing Dol Guldur at its basic form was pretty cool. Adventures were kind of weak. Could have went into more detail. The map connected well with the map from Rohan and Lorien, but didn't connect with the Northern Mirkwood map. I wish they'd gone all the way to the Sea of Rune. Maybe that would have been cool. But we're talking more with Southern Mirkwood, so they could have dealt more with that area. Next up, we get Northern Mirkwood, the Wood Elves Realm. Again, this book, slightly better than the Southern Mirkwood book, because I'm biased, because I like the Dwarven period, the Dwarves. I wish they got into more detail with the Lonely Mountain, more adventures around that area, and Dale, as well as the Iron Hills. It could have been much better than it was, but it's slightly better than Southern Mirkwood. Then we get Isengard and Northern Gondor. This was a pretty cool book. So now we're getting into the top tier books here. This was pretty cool. I like how the layouts for Isengard itself and the Ring of Orthanc were really, really cool. Excellent. It gave it the military stats of the Gondorian period, which I liked. Because I always wondered how many men Gondor had in that region. And it gave a pretty good description. This book could have been combined with the Dunland book or with the Fangorn book, and they could have extended. They said Northern Gondor. Well, they could have added a Norian, made it more than it was, or added the beacon towers as well. But it was a cool book. Isengard was definitely one of my favorites. You can't do really many adventures in Isengard itself. Or another thing they could have did was they could have put Isengard and Agranost, Helm's Deep, before the Rohan took over. Have the two towers there. But it was a pretty cool book. Next up we get the Grey Mountains. The Grey Mountains, a lot of things you can do. Like there's a lot of dragons. I like how they fleshed out all the dragons, made more dragons than just Smaug and Scatha. They're the only ones you really hear about. And it gave the Dwarven period. So I thought the layouts for all the Dwarven mines and tunnels was really cool. The adventures could have been stronger, obviously, with such material to work with. And they could have added Erebor and the Iron Hills into this, the Grey Mountain region. But a good book, overall. Umbar, Haven of the Corsairs. Now, because this is an earlier book, the artwork isn't as good. The city map was cool, and the regional map was really cool. I loved it. I wish it had connected with the Gondorian campaign modules. But because this is one of the first modules before the Gondorian ones have been created, I can understand. Those ones, like I.C.E. Lords of Gondor, should have connected with this. But it was a different map style. Also wish they had gone up into Ardor, or down south into what was far Harad. The adventures were kind of weak, but I love how they give the stats for the military, especially the naval designs. So you have ship battles and stuff like that. So it's a pretty cool book, pretty good introduction to Middle Earth. It was the Court of Ardor in southern Middle Earth. This was the second campaign module based in the south, and this one went far south. This was in uncharted territory. So I thought they did a pretty cool job. The whole story behind the Court of Ardor, how it's not Saronic but more Gothic, was interesting. So it's a very interesting storyline. The map was really cool. Didn't connect with anything. I wish Greater Harad had connected to it. But again, there was a different map style they used. From the earliest campaign modules to the later ones. The graphics of the later campaign maps was much better than the early ones. But yeah, there was a lot of cool adventures, a lot of cool sites to visit. The military tables were kind of weak, and they could have expanded it much more. But for what it was at the time, it was a great book. Mirkwood, The Walls of Ravania. And this is basically putting a revised campaign module, putting both northern and southern Mirkwood together in one big book, which was a good idea. Again, the maps didn't connect very well, the two maps they give you, which really sucked. They could have fixed that problem, you think. And they didn't really add that much new material. They did add the Iron Hills a little bit more. Other than that, not much changed. Very minor things. They did talk more about the Easterlings in this one than they did in the previous Southern Mirkwood book. But other than that, it was pretty much the same book, but better. But the changes they made it better. Angmar, Land of the Witch King. Absolutely love this. This was the first book they brought out. And I always wondered how big Angmar was militarily and what its fortresses would have looked like. Because after Angmar was defeated, the Witch King was defeated in the battle, Evandin, and he fled. The Gondorians stayed for a couple of years to knock down all the fortresses that the Witch King had. Adventures are okay, like the border clashes are always cool, and you can always do border raids and try and spy on stuff. But I really love the military tables they brought out. Next up, we get Sea Lords of Gondor, Pelargir and Lebanon. Interesting region, because it's on the forefront with the Haradrim and the Corsairs and the Umbarians. So you get a lot of naval stats, which I really liked. Love the map of Pelargir. I don't know, it's Pelargir or Pelargir? Pelargir. But it didn't connect. It was missing a section down the middle. So it never connected right. Left a gap. I wish they'd also added more of southern Ithilien. So Harlothin and also parts of Arondor more. Added that to the map. and give more stats for Harad. But this was a pretty cool standalone. The adventures were weak as hell. But where it was and its location made it a really cool place to have adventures. And it's on the forefront of the War of the Ring. Right, next up, Lorien and the Halls of the Elven Smiths. I love the fact they went back in the Second Age and did Eregion. I thought that was extremely cool. And they had military stats for it. Wish they'd added Sauron's his military army that came up that way. And the Númenóreans, that would have made it even cooler. The shape of the city was kind of cool. The idea of the Jewelsmiths Halls. Then you got Lorien. I like the layout for Lorien itself, like Lothlorien. And the city, the Elven city in the middle. Lorien and Celeborn are very interesting people, especially Galadriel. But Lorien is kind of a boring place too, itself. There's not much that happens there. They don't fight any major wars or anything. So the Lorien part was kind of boring. But I do like the fact they give military tables, because then you could send Camul the Easterling and the forces of Dol Guldur against Lorien in the War of the Ring. Maps were pretty cool. They give a lot of maps for this one. And they do connect pretty well with the Dunland map and the Rohan map, as well as Southern Mirkwood. Greater Harad. I love this book. I love the map. I wish it had connected to Far Harad, Shadow in the South, and Court of Ardor. That would have made it a super huge map and really cool. The adventures were pretty cool. The NPCs were pretty cool. Though they put too many lesser rings of power. I don't know why. Layouts were cool. It was just a really great book. I loved it. It's my second favorite Southern Middle-earth book. Rangers of the North, the Kingdom of Arthane. I love this book as well. The adventures, the political intrigue, and the assault on the northern border was pretty cool. The adventures were good, except for the rude one in the Third Age. That was the weakest of those adventures. But the other ones were pretty cool. I wish they'd given more description of Anunimus and Fornost, especially Anunimus when it was a ruin as well. And better military stats. They kind of short-shifted the military there. And they could have added Amansul as well, the layouts for that. But overall, it was a great book. One of my favorites. I used it a lot. Next up, we got Empire of the Witch King. This is basically the Angmar book all over again. Except for they went into more detail in certain cases. They fleshed out things better. The map was pretty cool. Didn't like how they cut the map at Rudar with Angmar. Go back to my video, you'll see what I mean. Or if you have the book, you'll know what I mean. I wish they made it one continuous map. And I wish they added more Rudar in that. For some reason, Rudar never got its own standalone campaign module. But it was very cool. I love the layout for Carn Dûm. And I used this book extensively when we had the Four Kings scenario with Cardolan Arthedain versus Rudar Angmar. Riders of Rohan. Excellent book. Gave all three eras of the Rohirrim, from the earliest history right down to the War of the Ring. Absolutely loved it. They had adventures for all three areas, regions. They didn't do a map for the Northern Mirkwood region, or when they're on the plains of Rovania as the Eothram. But they did have a pretty cool map of the Rohan book, which combined well, meshed well with the Dunland one, the Lorien one, and the Fangorn and Southern Mirkwood, or Mirkwood one. Shadow of the South, my favorite Southern book. There was a lot of cool ideas in this. Again, uncharted territory, so I.C.E took a lot of liberties. I like the idea of the Army of the Southern Dragon by Hill, the Nazgul. Military tables could have been a little better, and the map, they could have had a pull-out map. They never did. That was the one drawback to this module. There's no pull-out map, and the maps are all over the place in the book itself, and they don't connect to anything else. Other than that, this was definitely, used this a lot. Next we get Mount Gundabad. Love this book as well. This is another all-time favorite. The layouts for this were excellent. The NPCs that they used were excellent. The idea of the Scourge of the North, Skorg, and the Seed of Skorg, and how the current ruler has to deal with his two sons and two different spires, and the intrigue, as well as all the layouts. Adventures were pretty cool. You could be an orc if you wanted to in this one, and you can use their military to take over the north. Gorgoroth. Love the cover art. Love the map. I wish they got into Nirn, the Nirn area itself, and better added more of Ithilien into their map. But adventures in Gorgoroth are going to be hard because when Sauron's there, you're not moving freely. But I like the cities that they had, and the backstory was excellent. Moria, the Dwarven city. Absolutely loved it. The layouts were cool. They went into so much depth. Adventures were not too keen on because, you can't really adventure when the dwarves live there because the dwarves aren't going to let you wander around too much unless you're a dwarf yourself. But after the dwarven period, it's your fair game, and you can wander to your heart's content or until the Balrog or the orcs get you. So definitely love that. Loved how they had the military table. Used Moria as the wild card in the Four Kings scenario. What would happen if Moria decided to use their army against Angmar? Probably would have turned things out much differently because dwarven engineering know-how with the army of Arthedain plus Linden and Rivendell would have been a killer. Could have destroyed Angmar much sooner. So that was one of those things. Before we unveil the number one pick, some things I wish they had gone to. I wish they'd done Rudar standalone campaign module. The area Rune itself, we'll get to that much later, but they didn't do a Runish module. They also never did Anorian by itself, or Ithilien by itself. They did Minas Ithil, but not Ithilien itself, or Ardor. Key areas they could have filled in the blanks for, and also they could have also gone back and did Khand and near Harad and Ardor. So they could have did more regions like that. Linden, but Linden would have been kind of boring. Not much happens there, except for in the first age. But second age and third age Linden is pretty much a backwater, but they could have gave something and did the military stats to help out Arthedain. I know there was talk of them doing it, and they had started it, but they never got around to it. The number one book, campaign module I loved the most was The Lost Realm of Cardolan. This was the very first one I bought. It was excellent. The adventures were cool. They all tied in together. Cover art was great. The maps were great. A little bit off-center. They could have made it all one continuous thing instead of all these little pieces. The city of Tharbad was well done. Siduri. It was just a great module. The NPCs were great. The history, the backstory was great. I can't really find any faults. Like the adventures, like if you were to play all the adventures and base everything on the outcome, you might have been able to either rebuild Cardolan or help the Cardolani join with Arthedain and fight back, try to rebuild. That's what I did. And that was the whole basis for the Four Kings period. So that is my ranking of all 23 campaign modules from the first and I guess second edition, depending how you look at it, of the 80s and early 90s. Like I said, the ones in the middle kind of flip-flop, but overall, that was how I would rank them. Anyone else out there, let me know how you guys would rank yours. Who you guys your number one campaign module and who you guys your worst. I'd love to know. Anyway, until next time, this has been Roman Daysel. I'm out of here.
I'll see you in the land of Moria. Death awaits you at the border. Pass on through the gates and destroy the ring of power and wonder. Shadows increasing, beast throughout the land is ceasing. Evil mist flows through the valley, silence wailing, never ceasing. From out this barren empty land, nations formed from brick and sand. Now is almost as Robert's 95.